I stood outside the black iron gate, fists clenched at my sides, staring at the bright red lock that had no business being there. My land, my ranch, stood quiet just beyond the fence, bathed in the warm orange glow of a Texas sunset. Horses grazed lazily near the barn, unaware that their owner had just been locked out of her own property. A small plastic sign dangled from the lock with 3 blocky letters, HOA. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the kind that comes from betrayal, not the sun. A woman named Carolyn, the HOA president and self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, had crossed the line for the last time. I yanked at the gate. Nothing, not even a rattle. She'd zip-tied the hinges shut too, and all over a zoning dispute she invented out of thin air. My hands were shaking. That's when a rumble filled the air, deep, thunderous. I turned. A caravan of bikers, big, bearded, leather-clad, roared past on the county road. Then I smiled. The kind of smile you only get right before you do something real stupid or absolutely brilliant. "You picked the wrong cowgirl to mess with, Carolyn," I whispered. "Let's see how you like neighbors who actually make noise." 2 months earlier, things were quiet. Too quiet. After my divorce, I bought the ranch with what little I'd gotten in the settlement. It was 30 acres of open sky, hard soil, and dreams I'd buried since my 20s. My plan was simple. Live peacefully, maybe run a small horseboarding operation. Nothing fancy. But the HOA didn't like the idea of a ranch in their master-planned community, even though my land was technically outside their jurisdiction. Didn't matter. Carolyn had connections, on the zoning board, with the sheriff's office, even the mayor. She made sure that every time I tried to start something, paperwork got lost, inspections failed mysteriously, or permits were denied. At first, I thought it was bad luck. Then I realized it was her. Carolyn had never liked me. Not since I moved in. Said my lifestyle didn't fit the aesthetic. Her exact words. And it wasn't just her. Her little circle of power moms and wine sippers whispered things every time I showed up at a community event. "Oh, she's the one who left her husband. I heard she's got bikers in her family." One time I wore boots to a holiday mixer, and Carolyn asked if I'd come straight from feeding pigs. I smiled through gritted teeth. But that was before they locked me out. My sister, Madison, had warned me. "That neighborhood is poison," she said. "It's like Stepford wives in yoga pants." She wasn't wrong. But I needed the land, and it was all I could afford. Besides, I thought I could handle a few snooty neighbors. What I didn't expect was how deep their claws ran. They sent me citations for invisible violations. Grass too tall, even though I had xeriscaping. Unpermitted structure, referring to my old barn that had been standing since 1964. I appealed everything. I lost every time. Then they hit me with the nuclear option. Claimed I was in violation of an HOA easement that predated my purchase. Something that wasn't even in the closing documents. Next thing I knew, the gate was locked, and they mailed me a fine for trespassing on my own land. When I called the sheriff, he shrugged, said it was a civil matter. I could barely sleep that night. But sometime around 3 a.m., I remembered a flyer I'd seen on a gas station bulletin board a week earlier. Red Vultures Motorcycle Club Annual Bash, seeking rural venue. I'd laughed when I saw it, but I wasn't laughing now. I picked up the phone. The next Saturday they came, not just 5 or 10 bikers. I'm talking 40 motorcycles, rolling in like a steel stampede. Dust kicked up in swirling clouds as they parked along the dirt road leading to the locked gate. I met them at the front, wearing my best jeans and a button-down shirt like I was about to negotiate a cattle trade. Their leader, a thick-chested guy with a gray beard and mirrored sunglasses, stepped off his Harley and nodded at me. "You the one with the ranch?" "Sure am." "You serious about letting us party here? You serious about raising hell?" He grinned. "Lady, you got yourself a deal." I handed him the bolt cutters. The gate didn't stand a chance. By nightfall, the ranch was alive in a way it hadn't been since I bought it. Bonfires roared, music blasted, and the sound of laughter echoed across the fields. There were grills sizzling, kegs stacked on hay bales, and motorcycles lined up like parade floats. Some of the bikers brought their families, wives, kids, even a grandma or two. It was rowdy but respectful. My horses didn't even flinch. But across the hill, in the manicured homes with pristine flower beds and color-coded trash bins, the neighborhood lost its mind. Police calls started pouring in, noise complaints. Suspicious individuals. By midnight, I saw Carolyn's porch light flicker like a warning flare. I sat in a lawn chair, sipped a beer, and toasted to the chaos. Next time, I muttered, try asking nicely. By the time the second party rolled around, Carolyn had already called 3 emergency HOA meetings. None of them were attended by anyone under 50 or anyone not personally offended by tattoos, leather jackets, or the sound of classic rock after 8 p.m. I watched from a distance, leaning on my fence post with a cup of strong coffee as she stood on her porch with a megaphone, yelling something about community values and rural thugs. Meanwhile, one of the red vultures was teaching his daughter how to rope a dummy steer on my front lawn. His wife handed me a plate of ribs, like we were old friends. Thanks for letting us use the place, she said. Most people don't trust us long enough to learn our names. I shrugged. People like Carolyn don't know the difference between a threat and a good time. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the parties. This was about control. And for the first time in a long time, I had it, and Carolyn couldn't stand it. Flashback a week earlier, right after the first biker bash ended and the last tail light faded down the dirt road. I had barely cleaned up the beer cans when I found a thick manila envelope duct taped to my mailbox. Inside, a cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney. They accused me of violating multiple community standards, endangering public safety, and harboring criminal elements. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it in the mud. My land wasn't even in their official jurisdiction. Their rules didn't apply to me. But that's the thing with people like Carolyn. They don't care about boundaries. They create their own. When they can't control you, they try to break you. So I did what any sensible woman with nothing left to lose would do. I invited the Red Vultures back the following weekend, this time with live music and a mechanical bull. And I made sure the whole neighborhood got an invite. Printed, hand-delivered, signed in ink. All are welcome. Even the haters. The second party wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. Over 70 bikers showed up, along with their families, friends, and even a few curious neighbors who'd secretly grown tired of HOA tyranny. A man from 3 houses down brought his teenage son. He's always wanted to learn how to fix a motorcycle, he told me. Can't do that at a book club. We set up food tents and a dance floor in the barn. Someone projected movies on the side of my house. Kids ran barefoot through the field with glow sticks. There wasn't a single arrest, not one fight, and 0 damage to anything but Carolyn's pride. I caught her standing on the edge of her yard, arms crossed, phone in hand, recording everything like she was going to submit it to the FBI. One of the bikers, Tank, they called him, walked right up to her and offered a slice of pie. She slapped it out of his hand. He just laughed and walked away. She was losing, and she knew it. That night, as I sat on the tailgate of my truck watching fireflies and listening to people who had once been strangers share stories like family, Madison pulled up beside me. She stepped out, looked around at the makeshift festival, and shook her head. This is the most you thing I've ever seen. I smiled. You think it's too much? No, she said. I think it's just enough. But you know she's not going to stop, right? I nodded. Let her come at me. I've got nothing to lose. Madison sat beside me and watched the dancing, the laughter, the joy that Carolyn's regime had tried so hard to silence. Just be careful, she said. This kind of power. It makes people dangerous. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of noise. Sirens. 3 squad cars, a city code inspector, and a tow truck lined up outside my gate. Carolyn stood in the center of it all, arms folded like a general leading a charge. I walked up in my pajamas, coffee still in hand. What's this? I asked. The sheriff, A guy I'd gone to high school with looked uncomfortable. She filed a complaint. Says you're running an illegal event venue. I laughed. It's my ranch. I'm throwing parties. That illegal now? The inspector stepped forward. You're being cited for unauthorized gatherings, failure to comply with emergency access codes, and... Spare me, I said. You all know this is garbage. Carolyn stepped forward, lips tight. This is just the beginning. You've brought criminals into our community. I leaned in real close. You think they're the criminals, Carolyn? At least they don't hide behind lawsuits and golf club memberships. I turned to the sheriff. You want to arrest me? Do it. But you better bring more than paperwork next time. He sighed, told me I'd need to appear in court, and handed me a pink slip. Carolyn looked smug, but I wasn't shaken. If she wanted a war, she had one. And the worst part for her? I was just getting started. Court day came faster than I expected. It was the kind of humid Texas morning where the sun feels like it's daring you to get mad enough to fight. I wore my best jeans, a clean white blouse, and boots I'd polished the night before. Carolyn showed up with 3 attorneys in matching suits and one very smug expression. She looked like a woman who thought she'd already won. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't need one. I had something better. A paper trail, a copy of my land deed, and a stack of photos proving that every single accusation she'd thrown at me was a lie. But the most powerful thing I brought into that courtroom wasn't documents. It was truth. When the judge asked me to speak, I didn't talk like a lawyer. I talked like someone who'd been bullied for far too long. I explained how the HOA had tried to strangle my dreams with red tape, how they locked me out of land I legally owned, how they used their influence to weaponize the system against someone who didn't look, dress, or act the way they liked. When I finished, the judge sat back in silence. Then he looked at Carolyn's team. And you're telling me the HOA had no legal jurisdiction over her land? One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Well, technically, the judge cut in. You wasted my time. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Not in cheers, but in stunned silence. Carolyn looked like someone had slapped her with a cactus. But here's the thing. I didn't stop there. I knew Carolyn wouldn't quit just because she lost a court battle. She was the type to regroup, dig deeper, and strike back harder. So I went public. I reached out to a local news outlet, Channel 7 Eyewitness, sent them everything, photos, emails, the video footage of the bikers being respectful, kind, human. I explained how a woman trying to rebuild her life was being targeted by a homeowners association that thought it ruled more than it did. And when the reporter asked if they could visit the ranch, I smiled. I'll even fire up the grill. The news story aired 2 days later. It hit harder than I expected. The headline read, Texas rancher battles HOA harassment and wins with the help of a biker club. They showed clips of Tank helping an elderly man fix his porch steps. They interviewed kids who said it was the most fun they'd had in years. They aired footage of the mechanical bull and laughter and bonfires, images that made Carolyn's words about dangerous outsiders fall flat. And then they showed the gate. Still dented from the HOA's lock, still rusted from that day I stood powerless behind it. That lock, I told the reporter, wasn't to keep people out. It was to remind me I didn't belong. But they were wrong. The video went viral. Not just local viral, national viral. TikTok clips, Facebook shares, even a reaction video by some guy with 3 million YouTube subscribers. Within days, the Red Vultures were internet folk heroes. People started showing up, not just bikers, but teachers, veterans, single moms, people who'd also been steamrolled by HOA boards, zoning offices, or smug neighbors with too much free time. The ranch became a symbol of something bigger than a land dispute. It became a rebellion. And Carolyn? She panicked. The next time I saw her, she was at the farmer's market, hiding behind a wide-brimmed hat and pretending not to see me. But the mayor saw me. The city council saw me. Suddenly I wasn't the problem. I was the woman who stood her ground when the system tried to erase her. The HOA board called for an emergency election to restore community order. Carolyn was voted out in less than 10 minutes, replaced by a retired Marine who once lost a garden gnome to HOA enforcement and never got over it. "I've been waiting for this moment for years," he told me, but just when I thought things had settled, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was Tank. His voice was calm, but I could tell something was off. "You might want to come down to the ranch," he said. "Something's not right." I jumped in my truck and sped down the road, heart thudding like a jackhammer. As I turned the bend and came into view of my property, I saw it. Smoke. Dark, rising, ugly smoke curling into the sky above my barn. And in front of it, a message, spray-painted across my fence in dripping red letters. "Enough! Go back to where you came from!" Everything froze. My tires crunched gravel as I rolled to a stop. I didn't cry. Not yet. But inside me, something cracked open. Something old and deep and done being polite. They'd made it personal. And now, so would I. The firefighters arrived just minutes too late to save the barn. It had been mine for barely a year, but it held the memories of a lifetime. My first real investment after the divorce. The place I'd cried in secret while the world outside thought I was strong. It wasn't just lumber and nails. It was mine. And someone had torched it to make a point. A message in red paint, bleeding across my fence, still fresh when the smoke finally cleared. "Enough! Go back to where you came from." Tank stood next to me, jaw locked tight, arms crossed. His crew stood behind him like a silent wall. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. I could feel their rage buzzing in the air like bees ready to swarm. But it was Madison who stepped forward and said the thing I needed to hear. "You know who did this, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I do. Because that handwriting? I'd seen it before. On the HOA letters Carolyn used to slide into my mailbox. Because that exact phrase? I'd heard it from her mouth the day I moved in, whispered under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. I didn't need fingerprints. I needed a spotlight. I called the same Channel 7 reporter who covered the original story. "You want the full scoop?" I asked. "Someone just burned down my barn. Same HOA that locked me out is now trying to smoke me out." She was at the ranch within 2 hours. Cameras, microphones, the whole 9 yards. I walked her through the ashes, through the wreckage, pointed out the threat on the fence. "This isn't about code violations," I said to the lens. "This is about control, about fear, about what happens when people don't like seeing someone different live free." Then I told the truth. All of it. The favoritism, the bullying, the threats, the suspicious timing of inspections. I handed over every document, every photo, every letter the HOA had sent me. Tank backed me up, along with 3 neighbors who'd once feared speaking out, but now stood tall beside me. The story aired that night. This time, it didn't just go viral. It exploded. Suddenly, it wasn't just my story. People across the country started sharing their stories. Retirees whose lawn gnomes were stolen, veterans who got fined for putting flags on their porch, single moms penalized for having too many kids' toys in the yard. Hashtag after hashtag spread like wildfire. $, free the ranch, $, HOA revenge, $, don't mess with bikers donations poured in. A GoFundMe I hadn't even started myself crossed $200,000 in 2 days. Volunteers showed up from 4 states over, farmers, welders, builders, even college kids on spring break, to help rebuild my barn from scratch. Not a soul asked for a paycheck. And Carolyn? She disappeared. First from the HOA board, then from the neighborhood Facebook group, then, eventually, from the neighborhood altogether. Rumor had it she sold her house under market value and moved to Florida to start fresh. I never bothered to verify. I figured she was exactly where she belonged, far away, alone with her bitterness and shame. 2 months later, my new barn stood taller than the last one. Reinforced, fireproofed, beautiful. The Red Vultures threw a party to celebrate, this time with local police in attendance as guests, not responders. One officer even rode the mechanical bull. Kids carved their initials into the fresh wood beams. Families danced barefoot under string lights. No more fear, no more fighting, just freedom. And that gate? The one they once locked to keep me out? I tore it down, replaced it with an open arch that read, "Everyone is welcome here." I stood at the edge of my land that night, watching the fireflies flicker in the dark, listening to the distant hum of music and laughter. Madison came up beside me, arms crossed, smiling wide. "You really did it," she said. "You took everything they tried to destroy and turned it into something stronger." I looked out over my land, my people, my home. "No," I said, my voice steady. "We did." And just like that, the war they started was over. But the story? The story had only just begun.